Ho, ho, ho.
Speaking of hoes,
We're going to be talking about hoes today.
this is the holiday special.
Holiday special. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can see that Avery and I are all dressed up for Christmas. We didn't plan this. It just kind of happened. And so we're getting in the spirit and continuing this Womanizer mini-series. This is week 3 of, diving into some of these concepts that we're going to be exploring more inside the Womanizer program that is launching in 2025 that you and I are going to be co-collaborating on. And yeah, I think in the spirit of Christmas and talking about hoes, I think it's appropriate to explore, the concepts, the ideas, the conditioning that women have been kind of brought up in and programmed to kind of fit into this archetype of a good girl and don't be the hoe, right? And how so many girls are raised to be afraid of that word. Yeah. So afraid of that word that that's like the scarlet letter. You never want to be called a hoe. So the opposite of that is like, be the good girl. Yeah. And I know in the last couple episodes that we did, I shared a little bit about my background and history with that and how for a lot of my life I fell into that category. But I think it's important for us to kind of just define what the good girl kind of archetype is. And then we can kind of see where we land with that and what comes up. But what do you think of when you think of the good girl?
I think it's funny. I love that you mentioned about your background too, because as you were mentioning that, I also reflected on even me when I was a sex worker. And in a way, I was still conforming to the good girl because it was that form of self-abandonment in pursuit of the adoration or agreeance of other people so that I could, make money or be popular in what I was doing. And so for me, that good girl archetype is fit into a societal mold, shrink yourself, be polite, be feminine, be soft, don't be too much, be agreeable, don't take up too much space was a big one. And for me personally, and I know this probably resonates with you coming from a very religious background, it was also everyone else's feelings were more important than my own. I was so responsible for making sure everybody else was happy and felt good. And it was almost like my feelings did not matter in any of that. So a lot of that in that good girl. I
know. I think for me, I was so afraid to make a mistake. I was so afraid of getting in trouble, of being punished. So it was like, how do I follow the rules? Do what I'm told, make good grades. Like it was really focused on seeking that validation from my external world, from the people, making people like me. How do I be likable? Doesn't mean I necessarily have to be the most popular, but how do I was the girl that could fit in with every different type of group. I could kind of, like you said, mold myself into what did I need to be in order to be what you want me to be. That was like a big theme
and
for
a big
me.
one for me around that too. And this is actually, as my friend, you know this is something I'm currently been expanding into, was the fear of being seen as ever being a mess or not having it together. And so then there was this idea that like, oh, if you're messy and it's not together, push everyone away until you have it all put together.
No one can see that.
But keep that to yourself. Don't let anyone see that. And then when you feel like it's all put together again, then go out. But it robs you of so much intimacy and connection. And then you're just so alone in that mess, which we all have messes.
Right. And the funny thing is we tend to do that for ourselves, but yet we're the first ones there to be there for everybody else.
And that's the good girl.
Right. The good girl is the one that prioritizes like being that caregiver, that people pleaser of like, your feelings matter. If you're going through a hard time, oh baby, let me take care of you. Let me but the moment that I'm doing that, there's this like idea that, oh, we won't be loved or we won't be accepted. People can't see our flaws. So let's make ourselves into this perfect image of what that's what we'll present to the world. And for me, that was the thing that led to having a life that looked a certain way. On the outside, but felt so different on the inside because it was all about the representation or like the persona that I was putting out to represent the version of me that I wanted to be, but wasn't always authentic.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thinking about that even lately, a big one for me has been owning if I don't feel okay and I'm in public. I know in the past, I always had this idea I had to be this bubbly, happy, like, even if I inside was deeply depressed or something. And so for me, even getting out of that is if I'm having a bad day and I'm in a group of people, I'm like, how are you doing? Sometimes I'll just be like, I'm existing. I'm here. Like, rather than being like, I'm good. I'm okay. And it's just that false mask.
Smile that we learn to put on for other people.
Yeah. To make them comfortable.
Right.
Yeah.
But even that, like, the willingness to be honest about how you actually are seems like a revolt against the good girl. It seems like you're, it is your like stamp of like resistance to saying, I'm not going to keep ignoring and masking and lying about how I really am to avoid confrontation or conflict or a discomfort, like an uncomfortable interaction. Because I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. Right. How often do we do that as women? So much.
So often. And that's what we're taught. You know, it's like, don't make everyone else uncomfortable because your feelings maybe are too big or too much. And it's like, keep that to yourself, handle it in private. Otherwise you're going to be unworthy or undesirable or seen as, you know, like the crazy woman or something. Yeah,
totally. Yeah. So these are some of those things. I hope you guys at home are like listening. And if you pick up on these and you're like, oh, I definitely identify this, you are probably like me, kind of conditioned into this. And I think that's one of the big things we want to do with this program is really empower ourselves and each other to live our most authentic, radically liberated and expressed lives that doesn't cost us our truth. That doesn't, you know what I mean? That doesn't require us to keep abandoning ourselves, masking and being and playing pretend.
Yeah.
You know,
being inauthentic to who we are. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that I think I know I can relate to, and I think probably a lot of people can, is this avoidance of risk, or this fear of like not being ladylike. Like, don't do that. That's not ladylike. For me, I was just reflecting on this today. I just got back from a 2-week long kind of hiatus. I went home for the holidays, saw my dad. And then I went to Puerto Rico for a 5-day retreat. And I was just kind of reflecting on what I received from that. And one of the things that came up for me on retreat was I could see how much fear I had picked up from my mom. And my mom had this fear of like something bad was going to happen. Yeah. If you do this thing, if you take a risk, something bad will happen.
Yeah.
Or something will go wrong. And we don't want that. So let's not take that risk. Let's play it safe.
Yeah.
Let's stay back. Let's wade and like, it's like play in the kiddie pool, you know? Yeah. And on this retreat, I was seeing that old part of me come up and being like, is this okay? Is something bad going to happen if we like, whether it's go on this adventure or open up in this way or whatever. And even though I've done a lot of work around that, I could feel that there's still this young part of me that is looking for that reassurance that what I'm doing is allowed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I had to do some reparenting over the trip, and it was obviously a beautiful time to do that. I was like, what does this part of me really need? Yeah. Because if we're afraid to put ourselves out there, for instance, if we're afraid to say what we really mean or be direct and tell someone how we feel or go for our dream or whatever it might be, like if we have this fear of, oh, well, if you do that, maybe so-and-so is not going to like you anymore. Or if you do that, this bad thing's going to happen. I had to like really sit with my younger version and be like, hey, what do you need? And what she told me was like, I really need some reassurance that I'm going to be okay. Yeah. And that was so healing for me. because I'd picked up a lot of that fear from my mom.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's even with the asking for what you want as part of that risk, because that's a big one I noticed.
Yeah.
And there's simple, like even just the other day, because I reached out to you, I was having an emotionally challenging day and I had a sister date. And this sister and I live very close and we're going to the same place. And I was an emotional mess. I didn't want to drive. And it's as simple as being like, will you pick me up? I had so much fear asking this. And then of course she was just like, yeah, I'm happy to pick you up.
Yeah.
It was no big, and then and so it's like just leaning into those edges and then realizing that people want you to ask for what you need. And that risk, it clears out the people who aren't meant for you and brings you more intimacy and closeness to the ones who are meant for you. But so often there's that fear of even asking for what we need or want or desire. And then that limits us in the risk. Like you said, we don't go after our dreams. We don't go after our goals because it's, once again, asking for what we want or need. Yeah.
It's too much, or it's too much because it's unsafe. We've been told that it's unsafe. And because historically women have, there have been things that have happened to women, you know what I mean? Who challenge authority or try to step into positions of power. And so, we've seen culturally over time that society has in the past celebrated the good girl and glamorized and sensationalized this character, a caricature of the feminine essence of what that looks like the princess, for instance, let's just wait for our Prince Charming to come save the day, and like you said, this, sometimes I think even the good girl can be the parentified child.
Yes. Hyper vigilant and hyper independent.
It's the parentified child that had to grow up really young, and whether it was you had to take care of your siblings or you had to take care of your parents for whatever reason, you had to become a caregiver. I have friends that had to do that, and they became the helper, the responsible one. And so that was seen as good job, good girl.
And that was part of the process for me yesterday as we're speaking on this. I was that kid, because of the things that happened in my household at a very young age. I was taught that it was my responsibility to keep all of my problems to myself and make sure everybody else was happy and taken care of, no matter how volatile it was. And so yesterday, as I was going through that process, I realized my little girl, because it's all around trust and surrender, the reassurance, like you said. And I'm like, what would happen if we just trust? Because I've always held it together. What if I stopped worrying about everybody else and I just did what I wanted to do and needed to do? And all of a sudden she was like, I'll die. I'll actually die. And I'm like, okay, you're not going to die, sweetie. It's okay. We can do this. And that's that piece, is because the whole life has been built around your safety is dependent upon taking care of your caregivers and those around you. And so shifting from that, it's a whole nervous system reset to learn that, as you said, reparenting yourself. It's okay. It's safe. I'm allowed. I'm worthy of this. I'm deserving of this. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if our whole lives we've been taught that to behave in ways to make us likable, and even if that means do what our parents say, or you follow the rules, do what we're told, sit down, be quiet, don't make a mess, don't draw too much attention to yourself, whatever we were told, and oftentimes boys are more encouraged to be assertive, to be bold, to be exploratory, to be that adventurous spirit. I was watching the guys in Puerto Rico. They were the ones that were like, I'm going to go climb the rock and jump into the river. And all the girls are like, oh, we're in this river and these grown men, 6'6", they're just little boys again. Let's go adventure, and we're going to climb to the top of this mountain, and then we're going to jump and my fear comes up, and they're just having this grand old time. And that was one of the moments I was like, wow, this is normal for them. And for me, this is scary. And so that rebelling against that, the need, the over assertion of if I'm not liked, or if I don't do it right, if I don't do it perfectly, then I'm going to die is what it really feels like internally, even though that sounds like a dramatization and it's like, oh, look at the girls being so dramatic.
Sometimes you have to be dramatic.
But when we think about why we stay in these patterns of behavior for so long, if we didn't think it was safe, we would change these behaviors and these patterns so much more easily.
It's a survival thing. And it is. It goes back to a very primal, and even like if you think back, like our tribal roots, it's very tribal, and as women, it's like, oh, I need to stay part of the herd, a part of the tribe. If I step out of line, I'm not going to be protected, and the thing is we don't live in that anymore. That's not our reality. And yet oftentimes that is what has been taught and passed down to women. And so it's, as you said, rebelling and breaking out of this understanding, like that's, yes, at one point, that was reality. That is no longer reality. Yeah. And the truth is, if you think about it historically, I think my friend was saying it's only been about 30 years that women have even been allowed to own businesses. And so if you think about it, this reality we live in is unprecedented. And it's never been this time in the world where women have the rights, where we have the liberties to rebel, to explore. And of course, there's still risk. There's risk in everything. Sure. It doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man. And it's that reprogramming, like you said, in your body, because your animal's like, I'm going to die. Literally. If I do this, I will die. Yeah.
I just want to normalize that for everybody out there. If part of, I think, if you're committed to, if you're in therapy, for instance, or if you're just like, maybe you're healing from a breakup, or you're just on a healing journey of whatever kind, for whatever reason, whatever has brought you to this podcast and to being more thoughtful and reflective on your life. And maybe there's something you enjoy about my content or Avery and how you found the show. But what we're really committed to is freedom and personal freedom. I think leads to like personal liberation will hopefully, the intention is to lead to collective liberation. But I was writing about this today that like there was a part of me that wanted to be safe, but there was a deeper part of me that wants to be free.
Yeah.
And that is the part that calls you to this work that says, hey, you don't have to live within this confined box and these limitations and these stigmas and these labels that have been placed on you or that you've accepted and you've agreed to. We can and that is going to inevitably be an uncomfortable, scary process because we're going to shake things up. Yeah. And with that, it might bring up your fears, which is like, oh, you're going to be labeled as difficult. Yeah. Oh, you start setting boundaries. Now you're being difficult. Oh, you're saying no to things now. Now you're being difficult. You're not just letting everybody just like giving and never receiving.
Being seen as like the bitch.
You're putting yourself last, and now you're saying, oh, I'm actually going to prioritize myself and what I need. There can be some pushback to that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But we're willing, like, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be doing the show if this hasn't been my path for a long time. And we want to kind of help guide you in that because we've seen what can come up when you start questioning the narrative, the cultural narratives that have been placed on us, because that's just one side of it.
Yeah.
And what we see on TV, what we see through movies and shows and reality TV, all the things.
Well, if you think about it, it's like even that good girl archetype leaks into the bedroom. Like how many women were taught like to not even try to get an orgasm or even know what one is. And then you just pretend and let the guy think that it was good because you're just like, well, I don't know. I'm not like, it's not about my pleasure. It's just this duty. I know when I got married really young, it was like, this is my job. It was never good, but it was like, well, this is my job. I'm a wife. So I just have to have sex with him, even if it's never pleasurable for me. And it wasn't until I left that I started being like, oh, this can be really wonderful.
Right. Right.
And there's so many women I've met who, when I talk to them about that, of like, have you ever had I don't know if I've had an orgasm. And I'm like,
You would know, babe.
Yeah, you probably have
First of all,
not been.
you will know.
Yeah, you probably have not been. And there's such a stigma around even having that desire of like, this orgasm is for me. And can I ask for what I need and what I want in this? Rather than being the good girl that's just like, oh, I'm just going to make him happy. And yeah.
Totally. I mean, and that goes back, if you didn't listen to last week's episode, we got into normalizing that taboo and a conversation around is sex spiritual. So definitely recommend going and listening to that because so many of us grow up with that idea that sex is for him or sex isn't. Don't put attention on your pleasure. Like it's for depending on how religious you grew up, it's for procreation. It's not for enjoyment. Okay. You know, and framing desire as and self-expression as sinful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And that's deep programming.
Yeah. Deep programming.
Deep programming. You know, the concept of a virtuous woman. Discourages women from exploring their individuality and their sexuality.
Yeah. Well, and so much religion even just like they discourage masturbation even.
Yeah.
So if a woman is never touching herself and just like discovering what feels good, how would you ever know in relationship even how to ask for what you want or what feels good to you if you've never explored your own body and had such a stigma around touching yourself? Yeah.
That was early on, like one of my personal like rebellious acts against against the church. Even though I grew up in the church, I was masturbating, dude. I was like, this is for me.
It's interesting how we'll create different, because like I started masturbating really young, but I had such a fear of actually touching with my own hands. So I would use other things, you know, toothbrush, you know.
The water faucet.
Yeah, you find the things. Yeah. And it was interesting how then in my adult life, I actually, like I'm pansexual and I always had an attraction to women and all my friends knew I was gay before I knew I was gay. And I'd be like, no, vaginas scare me. But it was because I was scared to touch my own. And then eventually when I got comfortable with I was like, oh no, they don't scare me. Quite like them. But it was just that programming from the church and you don't touch yourself, you don't masturbate, and how that leaked into what I perceived as allowable or what I thought I was actually open to or interested in just came from my own shame around touching myself and how when I broke through that, it changed everything in the way that I'm relate sexually to people.
Well, that's just another example of like just assuming that what we want is what we've been told we should want.
Yes.
Like your life will completely change when you really start to ask the question, what do I really want? Not what have I been told that I'm supposed to want?
Yeah. And you have to let it be messy because you're going to try stuff on and then you're like, I don't actually want that.
I don't want that. And that's how you learn. And it doesn't mean you need to be reckless with that, but like intentional.
Yeah.
That's the word. It's like intention, presence of like, what would I love to try that I've never experienced before?
Yeah. That's what I really loved about the tantric temples is the whole concept is everyone's there and we're sober and we're being intentional. I call it like the adult laboratory about let's explore our desires. And at any moment we can pause and stop the experience and be like, I'm complete, you know? So it's like getting to really break down those paradigms and those walls around, because that's the challenging thing I feel like sometimes in the muggle world. You just go up to somebody like, hey, I would really like to try this sexual thing with you. I don't know if I'm into it, but let's try it. And someone's gonna be like, what? Unless you have a great partner that you're very conscious with, which is such a gift. I mean, or if you have really beautiful friends who are open to these things, you can discuss all of this with them. But it's what I really found that I love personally about those tantric temples was having a place where there's no shame and we really get to explore. And that was what started to make me be like, wow, people need these places to even discuss it, like what we're creating this program, like just even talking about it.
That's the first step.
Yeah.
Is having the courage to just say it out loud.
Yes.
Because for so many of us, we're just holding on to these secrets.
Yeah.
And we just walk around with them. And I remember being at I think it was Arcadia Festival this past year here in Vegas. And in one of the workshops, they were like, we did a partner exercise and they were like, tell the person that you were partnered with, like something that you carry shame around or that you've never told anyone.
Yeah.
And that was such a powerful experience for a lot of people because it's an invitation to be witnessed and to be honest, but you really have to be willing to go there.
Oh yeah.
You know, you have to really be willing to shame is heavy.
So heavy, yeah.
It's heavy, you know, and shame is the thing that makes you want to hide. Yeah. It thrives in the shadow. It says never tell anyone that. Like that idea, that fantasy, that thought that is the epitome. It's too much. Yeah. And if anyone knew that, they're going to look at you different. And God forbid, that would be the good girl's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So for many good girls, they carry a lot of shame, internalized fear that if people really knew that something, that they would be punished or they would be looked at differently. And so the heartbeat of this program is about creating that safe space where nothing is off limits and there is no judgment. Yeah. There's no judgment. There's like a funny TikTok trend going around right now. It's like couples or even like brothers and sisters, parents like that are doing it. I saw a mom and a son do it today, but it's like, we listen and we don't judge. This is what they get on. And have y'all seen this? They get on and they're like, we listen and we don't judge. And then they admit something that they admit something that they do. And then they're like, okay. And I think it's rooted in a really great principle of like practicing non-judgment. And it's gotten playful and stuff online, but that's, one of the aspects of the culture that we're building within Womanizer is like, if you have questions, if you have things you've been carrying that you don't know who to tell, if you just are ready to start exploring the idea and the concept of what do I want, not sexually necessarily, maybe, but in your life. Yeah. Like, what kind of woman do you want to be? Because I know for a lot of women, and unfortunately, for some women, what they don't want is to grow up and be like their mom. Yeah. And that's, I had a client this week and she said, my biggest fear is that I'm going to turn out to be like my mom. Yeah. And if our mom didn't, carried shame, if our mom was depressed or didn't love herself or didn't know how to speak up for herself, or if she completely abandoned and neglected her own needs, like that's what we've been taught. Yep. And that's what we learn. And until you come into a space where the intention is to explore these things, we'll unconsciously just do what we've seen.
Yeah. And the best way to heal shame and release shame is to have it witnessed in that loving compassion and be like, oh, it really wasn't the big bad boogeyman I thought it was. Nothing bad happened. Yeah. Like I didn't die. Cool. Okay. I'm still loved. Like, look at that. Yeah. And it's such a great way to heal. And it's like, even outside that, like for myself right now, I'm exploring different relating dynamics and I'm dating a married man and woman and separately. Yeah. Hi. I know we haven't had this discussion yet. So this is news to me. They're ethically non-monogamous and they do non-hierarchical relating. Okay. And, it's been an interesting exploration because we're learning together. Yeah. We're all learning together. All learning. And it's, I'd always had this idea of, I want, divine partnership. I want this. And right now I'm in this exploration of, okay, well, I've always been taught that because I come from a religious background and monogamy and even
told to want certain things.
And even in the spiritual world, a lot of times it's like, oh, you need this divine union and all that. And at the same time, I have never been like these two overflow with love and we have separate. I'm not the unicorn because I didn't really want to do that either. I was like, I'm not trying to be a third, but each separately have so much love that they pour into me separately because they're just overflowing. And I'm like, what a fun, cool dynamic. To have two relationships that feed me very differently, but so much love. And I don't know yet what that means for me, but that's when with the exploring beyond what we've been taught and what we're understood, it's like, can I lean into these edges that maybe aren't even culturally or societally, viewed in a positive light so that I can uncover what's true for me and find that joy and that bliss beyond what anybody else might tell me is right or wrong per se.
Well, that's really experiential learning right there.
You're
really in the experiential learning piece, because it's different reading that in a book. Listening to someone else's experience is different when you're like, I'm going to try it for myself and see if that works or not for me. But then you know what I mean? So often we think clarity comes from thinking. We're like, I just need to think about it. Like recently this guy told me he was sort of interested in me. And and the good girl came out and I was like, I need to think about it. I need to think about it. Because I was a little caught off guard. And I was like, I wanted to be polite. Yes. I wanted to do all the but I didn't need to think about it. But the good girl's afraid of conflict. Yeah. So I'm still growing into these areas too. Yeah, like always. But it's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to live it or experience it. And the clarity comes oftentimes from doing.
And that's because oftentimes the thinking.
Because then I don't like this or I do like this.
And thinking oftentimes puts us in that analysis paralysis where we just, and I do this even sometimes, where we're just thinking and then we never take action because we can create these huge scenarios. One of my teachers, and I've shared this with you, she always laughs because sometimes I'll get in these thinking things. I'm like thinking it and I think every strategy and I think of everyone's perspective. Or the good girl too. I'm going to view everyone. I understand everyone's experience. Yeah. And she'd be like, you know what, Avery, you just really like to mentally masturbate. It makes you feel superior to just jack your mind off all the time. You're masturbating your way through life, but it makes it so you don't have to take action and be courageous. Because you put yourself in these traps where you see every perspective and understanding. And rather than being like, I'm going to take action on what I know I want, you're like, well, I'm so understanding of everybody, so I must just take no action and decipher
through it all. Yeah.
So I'm like, shoot.
Okay. Oh, that's powerful.
Valid.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it also, in a sense, makes you feel superior.
Right.
So then you don't have to take action because you're like, well, I'm so compassionate and understanding and considerate. And it's like, no, girl, you're self-sacrificing yourself. And you're not asking for things because you're like, well, I understand. And even still, I have to watch it. Sometimes I'll ask for things from people and then I'll like soften it by being like, and I understand if you don't want to do it, it's totally okay. You don't have to do it. No, stop it. Like,
if it aligns for you.
Yeah. Tori knows I do that to her. If it aligns for you, you can say no. It's fine. And it's just period. Just be like, this is my request, period.
Yeah.
They know they can say no. Yeah. And if they don't, that's their journey. We don't need to always be self-editing.
Yeah. The self-monitoring 24/7 is
exhausting.
Like, we should get paid for that surveillance. It's like 24 hours, It's exhausting. And we're like, why do we need a vacation?
Yeah.
Well, we could like give ourselves a little break and just be like, do the thing.
Yeah.
And I very much understand, like you're going against programming.
Yeah.
Which a program runs and it's running and doing its job. It's like what fires together, wires together in the brain. So if you've been thinking the same thoughts over and over again your entire life and you've been taught to do certain things a certain way, like all of a sudden you hear Avery and I like, just go do it. Or, just speak your needs or just like ask for what you want. Like, okay, let me do that. And you're like, I'm going against years and years and years of conditioning. This is a process. It takes time. There have been a lot of tools that we've used over the years to support ourselves in the reprogramming of our subconscious, because ultimately that's what we're running on 90% of the time. I mean, only about 10% of what we do say and think is like intentional and conscious. Everything else, 80% of what we're thinking are the same thoughts is what we had the day before.
Yeah.
And the majority of those are negative.
And even with where we're at, when we say just do, it's not like, oh, it's so easy for us. We're so courageous and strong. All the, as you shared in Puerto Rico. And like, even for me, when I ask for things, there's still a process sometimes that we need to sit with and move the emotion and the contraction and the fear. And it's building that self-trust, because the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And it's not easy to say, like in the beginning especially, but it's simple. It's like, okay, I'm just going to do it. And I'm going to trust that no matter what comes, whether it's conflict or breakdown in an interpersonal relationship, that I have my back, that I can hold myself through this. Or I have close, especially for me, it's my close sisters and friends. Like I can reach out and I know that they will hold me if I need that. And that's what this community can do. It's like having that group of women, a collective group where we're on this journey together. So come to us. Like, did you try asking for something and there was an interpersonal conflict or breakdown, or maybe someone shamed you because they're not ready for your truth? Bring that to us. Like, let's sit in that together. Let's heal these parts that are so often shoved to the background in our society and culture. Like, that's what this group and this community is for.
Totally.
Let's do that.
Yeah, because there are consequences to falling into this like good girl archetype prototype trap.
Yeah.
Like there really are. And I think it's important to kind of talk about some of those if we don't do the work of personal liberation and freeing ourselves from this. And I think one of the first ones that come to mind for me is this loss of authenticity.
Yeah.
Which has now been proven to be the highest vibration that we can live in is our authenticity. But when we fit into a box, none of us are one thing. Okay. We're complex, multidimensional human beings. We are always constantly growing and evolving. I'm not the same me today that I was a week ago, much less a year ago, much less when I was 18 and I thought I had it all figured out. Like, are you kidding me? You know, I look back in all these different iterations of my life. I have different values now. I have different desires now, and they have built upon each other as I've pulled these layers back. And so we don't fit into a box, you know? And I think trying to be something specific, like a version of like, oh, I need to be this version. I need to be the good girl, the good wife, the good girlfriend. Yeah. And even when we juxtapose that against bad. Yeah. So if I'm not good, then I'm bad. No. Yeah. So that's really like what we're saying. Yeah. So if I'm not perfect, I'm bad.
Well, it's kind of like those memes. I know you've seen them where it's just like, it's like, I'm in my villain era, which just means I'm saying no to things I don't want to do.
Right. And that's what we think. All of a sudden I'm a villain because
it's like, no, you just had a boundary. You just said you didn't want to do something. It doesn't, even for me, like beginning to say no to people who I don't want to go on dates with and stuff. I had so much shame of like, I'm a bad person because I don't want to go on a date with this. And why does that make me a bad person? Are you serious?
Still, y'all.
Yeah, I still struggle.
I'm teaching this program and I'm learning. I'm a student and I'm a teacher.
Always.
Both things can coexist. Yeah. A guy came up to me at the gym today. He's like, I have my headphones on. I'm doing my thing. He just comes and stands right in front of me. And he's like, you from here? I'm like, no. Where are you from? And like starts this conversation. Oh, no. And I'm like, I'm trying to be nice. And also like, I'm trying to do my thing.
Yeah.
And so we exchange a few words and he's like, so when are you free for me to take you out? And I'm like, I have a boyfriend, sorry. But in that moment, and so, like I said, I'm a teacher and a student. Yeah. Like I didn't want to utilize I didn't want to have to be conscious in the moment of like, let me explain to you why I'm not available for this in a way that's not going to.
But let's talk about that too.
Just do it.
Like, why do we need to explain ourselves? And I get it because I'm the same where I'm just like,
where it's like, I'm not interested.
Yeah. It's just like, no, thank you. Or I'm not interested. have a good day. But we do in the good girl archetype. It's like we go into that I need to explain it. I need them to understand. But the thing is we can't make people understand anyways.
Sure.
And a lot of times when we try
I don't want to embarrass him. I don't want to, I don't want him to feel bad. Which is like, why am I caretaking for his feelings?
Strange man at the gym.
I don't know you.
He already inconvenienced you in the middle of your set and time, but yet we're so concerned.
It goes deep, y'all.
It's
And this is why, like, these are the scenarios. It happens on the daily for women.
Yeah.
On the daily, maybe multiple times a day where you are stuffing your truth down.
Yeah.
I do it too. Let me be the first, like, let me lead the way and show you. I do it too. But it's where we swallow our truth.
Yeah. Shrink.
And convenient in the hopes to not make other people uncomfortable. And yet we abandon that ourselves. And even though in the moment I didn't abandon myself, I was inauthentic.
Totally.
And that's the consequence of living. And that's why I said that. It's like, that's what we lose. And we lose touch with our true selves, our desires, our dreams, because we're so focused on meeting other people's expectations, and fear of disappointing them or upsetting them becomes that driving force. And I think it just leads to a life of like chronic self-sacrifice.
And then sometimes you don't even know. For me, when I was getting out of the industry with sex work, because I was so used to being this fantasy for whoever was paying me at the time, essentially, I remember someone had asked me, they're like, well, what are you passionate about? I was like, I'm passionate about everything. And they're like, no, you're not. But I had gone so far from who is Avery, what is Avery actually like, that we lose that sense of authenticity. We don't even know
ourselves.
Yeah. And it took years of self-discovery. That's why if people look at my certifications, they're like, so you started in esoteric, you went to NLP and Tony Robbins, and then somehow went all the way to somatics and tantra. But it's because I had to figure it. I didn't know who I was. I had gone my whole adult life not being myself, being so inauthentic. And so it's a journey of uncovering.
That leads to the point that if you're listening to this and we, we bring up this question of like, what do you desire? You might not know.
Yeah.
And if you don't know, it might be because you've been, disconnected, like you said, and that's a journey of itself of like getting to know ourselves again and starting to follow our curiosities. After I got out of a relationship, I think it was like 2018, that was the time I started this work. And that ending of that relationship showed me just how distant I was from my true self, because I didn't know who I was without that relationship, because I had molded into what I thought I needed to be for him. And so I didn't know what music I liked.
Yeah.
I didn't know if I was like, someone was like, where do you want to go to dinner? I don't know. You pick. I didn't know myself. And so I signed up for a salsa dancing class by myself. I started just trying things.
Yes.
And sometimes it can feel like you're throwing spaghetti against a wall.
Yes.
You're like, what am I doing?
What am I doing here? Yeah.
But it's like this process of like becoming is the process of trying. And then it's trial and error of like, if I try it and I hate it, I don't have to go back.
100%.
But maybe I try it and I love it. And I realize this is something I actually really enjoy, or I meet somebody that like opens something else up in me. And so it's almost this returning to the child, the inner child, which was the one that knew how to play and follow their curiosities and follow the sense of adventure and awe before they were taught it was unsafe.
Yeah.
Or that they would get in trouble.
And the beautiful thing is like, as you go on that journey, as you embark on it, and it's like your life becomes so fulfilling and it's amazing, because then dating or your friendships, everything is so much more aligned with your soul's truth and your authenticity, that the quality, the quality of life, the quality of friendships, it's one of the things, I share a lot about. It's just like the friends I have right now, like 5 years ago, even, I would have never imagined that I'd have friends that I feel so seen and loved as I am, no matter where I am in any moment. And it feels every time I'm with my friends so nourishing and fulfilling. And like, if I had never embarked on that journey of self-discovery,
we wouldn't find each other.
No, I know. And it's crazy because I almost didn't go to that dinner too because I was bratting out and I never would have met you. So it's like leaning into those edges and those discomforts. That's where you begin to find. And even in dating then, it's like, I had a woman recently, she's like, I don't understand. Your dating life is so much better than most women's I know. And I was like, because I'm very clear on what's a no for me. And so I don't waste my time on dates or conversation. Even recently, I realized I don't like men just sitting in the dating app trying to talk. Don't talk to me. Either we're going to go out and meet each other and it's a vibe, or it's not. Like, I'm not here to talk to you forever. Like, that's not, I don't need to sit on a dating app doing that. And so as you start to do this, it becomes where you invest your time so much more joyful, fulfilling, passionate. And yeah, other people will look at you and be like, how do you have this magical life? I don't understand it. And it's like, because I just do what I want. It's about me, you know?
And that is what I want to empower people and women. It's like, you get to live the life you want. Yeah. Like, you get to start doing things you want to do. And that might feel wrong at first.
Oh yeah. It will feel wrong at first.
Yeah.
100%.
But like, even like you said, you're like, I almost didn't go to that dinner. We met at a girls' dinner 2 years ago. No.
A year ago. Which is crazy. I know.
Whoa.
It's like I've known you a lifetime.
I know. But this is also really real for women who are thinking about signing up for this program. They're like, oh, maybe I don't know about being around other women. Like, I don't know about like opening up, or I don't know, maybe because there's a lot of sister wounds. Like, maybe the girls won't like me. Maybe I won't fit in. Maybe it'll be weird. Yeah. You know, I get that. And also all the best things can come out of it too. Yeah. And what we're building is built with so much intention and love, because we've been in situations where, like, I know I don't want to walk into a room where I don't feel wanted or accepted or welcomed, and it's awkward. And I'm like, you're doing all of those like introductions and the things, but also that's how, like, your best friend can be like, your next best friend is a stranger that you haven't met yet. Yeah. So like, we're going to go through this like growth journey together of getting close as like a sisterhood. Because at the end of this program, there's an opportunity to all come to Vegas and come together in person, because we're going to spend these 4 months together, like doing this work. And then it'll like commemorate at the end of the summer to come together and like be together. And I promise you, these are like, there's an opportunity for you to meet like your sisterhood of like your tribe if you lean into this experience. And honestly, if you hadn't, like, we wouldn't be here. Yeah.
Which is crazy to think. It's been one of the most profound friendships that I've been able to experience, and like being held with you and just, so like, it's crazy to think. Cause I remember I texted our friend that night, Drea, who was hosting, and I was like, I don't want to come. She's like, just come. And I was like, I'm going to be late. Cause I was being so bratty about it. She's like, that's fine. You can be late. And I remember showing up late and being like,
yeah.
I just gone through a big breakup. So I was like, I was in a kind of place, but yeah, it's crazy to think my life would be insanely different had I not gone, and had I not been open. Cause you and I didn't even really get to connect that night. We just very briefly dropped in, and you were like, I would love to connect deeper. And then we did. And it took us a while before we did even. But there was like having that openness of like, okay, I'm open to this. I'm open to the possibility and seeing where this goes.
And that's all it takes, you guys. So if there's like that thing within you, you're like listening to this conversation, you're like, there's like, I kind of want to do it. Or like, I'm thinking about it. I don't know. Like, I really encourage you to listen to that gut instinct and that feeling, because that is like an inner compass that's trying to get your attention and trying to lead you somewhere. And we're going to create the space, and the women who are ready will be there. But I encourage you to like trust that inner voice, because I know it's scary, but the more you do and you lean into that, and that you have evidence for that you can trust yourself when you do take that step. That is where confidence comes from. And I know all of us as women want to be truly confident, and that comes from trusting yourself, and that comes from taking risks. And the good girl is afraid to take risks. And so the good girl's not very confident.
That's that like meekness, that smallness. And we both experienced that in our lives where it was like, well, we're just shrinking and small and didn't have that confidence. And Tori's like one of the most confident women I know, but she also takes a lot of freaking risks. Honestly, out of all the women I know, probably takes some of the most risks of women I know, which is one of the things I admire so much about her. But that's also the beauty of putting yourself in community with women who are doing it, because her ability to be courageous inspires me to be courageous, because also as a part of my little lizard brain that's like, oh my God, if I'm a little bitch and I don't start stepping up, I'm going to lose my courageous friends because we're just not going to be in vibration anymore. She's going to keep growing. And then I'm going to run this race right now. And so when you join these kind of communities, you're with people that inspires you
to
elevate because you're like, wow, everyone else is doing it. I can do it. And that's when you start building that muscle, that self-trust and that courage. Like, I got this. Look at this.
Another topic we're going to be exploring in the program that I think ties into this is releasing the sense of overwhelming guilt. Because when you start to give yourself what you want, there can be a voice that comes in and be like, who are you to do that? Like this internalized belief that a woman's worth is tied to how much she gives leads to that guilt. And especially when we prioritize ourselves. And so it's like, we're going to have a whole section of the program where we deal with guilt and shame and all of that. But I encourage you to like really embrace it, that you deserve this. Like you deserve. And I had a client this week, she was like, I signed up to work with you. She's like, I've worked with a clinical therapist for years. Like I've had all these different people, but like, I want to work with you because like you have something like I don't have. It's just like there's like a sense of peace and like a confidence that you have. And it seems like you've seen and you've tasted and you've touched that like that freedom and the peace that I like long for. She was like, is that true? Like, have you actually experienced that? Like, is that just like something I'm creating in my mind? I'm like, no, I have. I have. And that's why I want to like, we're guides because we've been where you are and we're on like this other side where we've tasted the sweetness of how good it can be when you choose yourself, when you love yourself, when you start to set boundaries, when you start to ask, like get to know what you really desire and start to build a life that reflects that. It's so empowering. It's so liberating. And it becomes a magnet to other people that are doing the same thing, which is why, you attract what you attract. And so, I want to encourage people to know, like, you might not know where you're going, but we know where we're leading you. We got you.
Yeah. That's one of the funny things that I was sharing this with, sitting the other day, actually, one of our friends. I was like, sometimes when I'm and this is the beauty of having community that reflects to you the best parts of yourself. I was like, sometimes when I'm having a really bad day and I'm being really hard on myself, the thing that can always bring me back to truth of who I am is I'm able to look at my closest friends and I'm like, I have some of the coolest friends, not to brag, like my friends are the best. And then I'm like, okay, well that must mean I'm pretty cool if these people want to hang out with me. And so when you're in these communities, it's such a beautiful reflection. It's like you wouldn't be here with us. You wouldn't even be listening to this podcast if there wasn't aspects of us that is within you. Your soul sees something within us that is already a part of you. And it's bringing you to these spaces because it's like, oh, I want more. I want the permission slip. I want the guidance. Like, and that's the piece you were speaking to. It's the guidance. Sometimes you just don't know what the first step is or where to go. And in these containers, you're able to be guided and led and held by people who've been there and we're doing it and we're walking it. And it's just such a beautiful space to get to be held like that. Yeah.
So this is a taste of what's coming. for the Womanizer program. Early bird enrollment ends in 4 days. So if you want to get in on the discounts that are available and the bonuses that are available with early bird enrollment, go over to the link in my bio. We'll also put it in the show notes so that you can grab a spot. We'll be reopening launch in January and the program will begin in February. So if you miss out on early bird enrollment, that's not the end of the world because we're going to keep coming back at you. You have an opportunity to join us in January. But if you want to snag a spot right now, make sure you lock in all of the exclusive discounts and bonuses. Then go over to the link in the show notes and grab your spot. That's it for this episode about the good girl. And we're going to come back at you next week with some more juicy content for the Womanizer Women series. Thanks for being here. Love you. Bye.
Bye.